Prior before then, I started my career in the theater. I interned for like 8 years, but I wasn't good enough to be on the stage. That is what my mentor would tell me, Remy, stage is not for you. So what you have to do is to learn the business of the stage. So you have to be at the background, learn how to produce, learn how to direct, learn how to manage artists and all that. So for 8 years, that was what I did with the theater company. And I moved on to actually producing my own project, my first project, which was Poetry Porter. And then I stopped in 2010, and I asked myself, what next? What seems to be the only next thing for me was to reinvent myself, and the only way to do that was for me to be a photographer. And I have never went to school to study art or to study anything, and I wanted to be a photographer. I was so much into it. I bought a camera. 2011, 2012, I was already winning prizes as a documentary photographer. I travel around a bit. And then a project that was developed in Italy, in Florence to be precise, was coming to Lagos. And then my boss at the time asked me to join this project as an assistant curator. I know a thing or two about literary art, but not really about visual art. I have not created any visual art project before. He said, you will learn, don't worry. And I said, okay. So I joined the project. Quite a lot happened, at the beginning because I was still grappling with a lot of things I need to learn how to do. The title of the exhibition was Africa See You See Me. Professor Awam at the time, when he created this project, was actually investigating how Africans see themselves as against how the colonial lens. He invited about 40 photographers, both from the continent and in the diaspora. It was a very big exhibition. And for the first time I was part of these, we had two shows in Lagos, one at the Nikkei Art Gallery, and the second one was at the National Museum of Nigeria, in which, of course, I was the main person who kind of installed the entire exhibition and also closed the show. I was there the entire time, when people were coming after the opening to see the show and all that. Closed it in Lagos and then sent it to Dakar in Senegal. Dakar, it was part of the Dakar Biennale, one of the offs at the Curatorial Institute in Dakar. And I learned quite a lot. Someone that was just starting photography, and I learned quite a lot from other photographers, established photographers, renowned photographers. Talking about Malik Sidibe, JD Ojekere from Nigeria, Andrew Sebo from Nigeria. I mean, quite a lot of renowned photographers. Name any photographer on the continent that is not in that exhibition. I don't think so. There was this particular female photographer from Cameroon. I so much love framing. I so much love, the colors and all that. So I learned quite a lot from this exhibition, not just, as an assistant curator, but also as a photographer. That was how my curatorial journey actually began in the visual arts. That is Professor Awam with the arts, talking to people who have come to see the exhibition. I think this will be in Macau because we travel with the show a lot. These were some of the pictures in the exhibition. So we had quite a lot of some countries that I have not even heard of. Artists have gone to this country and worked and then share their, how people were documented in the most respective way and not the way the colonial rulers were looking at us. And it was really an interesting foundation for me to be part of this exhibition, seeing works of great artists and all that. Basically, that was how I kind of started my learning, I would say. For me, I was interning with Professor Owen because I still work with him till date. We're working on a particular exhibition at the moment. That knowledge, I actually took it forward to then begin to work with community because I've always had this idea of working with community and not just working alone. I like to be in a collective. I've always liked that. So that was what led me to creating Vernacular Art Space Laboratory in 2016, actually, and I think it was registered in 2017. So I conceived Vernacular Art Space Laboratory as a community-based organization because at the time I was having a lot of troubles living in my own community where I was born and where I had lived for more than 30 years of my life. It was quite a peaceful community growing up. Never imagined ever that it was going to become a space for where they breed dogs and terrible things were happening in the community at the time. And I thought to myself that how can I help? What can I do? And the only thing for me at the time to do was to come in with my knowledge of art and try to train some young people, teach them something that they can see as an alternative to these other way of life. And then I began to work with them. I created the organization, and then we started a festival called Iwaya Community Art Festival. At the beginning, it was conceived as an international community art festival. Before that time, I had traveled around a bit, residency festivals, um, prizes, and all that. So I kind of know a bit of people in the art circle. So I wrote to them I was going to have this festival in my community. By sharing your work, I'll print and show. We don't have anything to give to you in terms of artist fee and all that or honorarium, but we'll show your work in the most respective way. And we got all of those works and printed them and mounted them around the community. Iwaya was actually a community that do not quite understand visual art. Performing arts, they can understand, but visual art, not quite. There was no space for it. Then we started with the idea of working with non-space, where we look for any alternative and available space within the community, and we mount images that have been printed in whatever form. And then we invite performance artists as well to come into the community. We started in 2016. In 2017, we started inviting international artists to the community because we don't just want it to be that we show their work. We also wanted to bring some international artists to the community to actually relate with people living in the community and also artists in Lagos. That was quite interesting and successful 2017, 2018, where between that time, we invited about 12 international artists, one of them from Mali. She came and did a performance lecture talking about the things that she has seen in the community. She had collected a lot of images, which was the background of, the previous slide was I was talking about Masira, where she had collected a lot of images, about 50 images of young adults, female within the community. And then she was talking about her concerns, things that people needed in the community. And we actually took this to the rural part of the community. These are the places where a lot of photographers will go make pictures and then they show those images in the gallery space in the museum that is disconnected from these people. They don't get to see the images, they don't get to know the discourse that was taking place on behalf of them within the gallery space. And that was what I wanted to break by actually creating this festival. I and my colleagues were able to do that by bringing quite a lot of artists into the community and making them feel accessible, making them feel connected to these artists. It wasn't just presenting their work, but also creating the breaking the boundary of artists and the audience and the space, breaking that boundary. So with Iwaya Community Art Festival, we collapse that boundary between the artists and the audience, basically, and also create new audience for the arts in Lagos. One of the things that we did was to look for spaces where politicians will put their postcards and posters and banners where they're having an election. So this is a major space where they put their posters in the Iwaya community, and those guys seated there are the guys of the streets. And it's so interesting that when we started, we have a good rapport with them. We have a good relationship with them. One remark was that maybe the first year they didn't quite have a grasp of what we were doing, but from the second year they quite got it, and then they were really into what we were doing. These posters that you are seeing here in this image, some of them were mounted in that particular space in the previous image, and the guys saw one of those posters as being maybe rude or not something that young, and they actually removed it before the next day. And I went to them, wanted to know why. And they said to me, because I actually put it there to provoke these guys. And they said to me that we know it's your artwork, but then it doesn't fit here because the young people are passing by and we don't want them to see it. And I said, yes, this is what we're talking about. I think we are having that conversation that I actually wanted to have with you guys without coming to you and starting some kind of conference and all that. So that was what the festival was able to do, stir conversation amongst young people and also people that matters within the community. And we were able to do this successfully with the festival. 2019, we couldn't present the festival as like to because of lack of fund. So we decided to rest a bit, and that is how we present the works within the community. Any space around at all, we try to mount images and also have performance in those spaces. And in 2000, and COVID came, we couldn't have the festival as well. And in 2021, we came back as a pioneer, which of course was also a successful one because of lack of fund and what was happening in the community at the time. We decided not to invite any foreign artists to the community, even from the African continent. We decided not to do that, but we actually got some works that we presented within the community and also have a lot of performances around. It's just illustrating how we've been presenting works within the community. We work with abandoned buildings as well, or uncompleted buildings, as they would want to say. But this is actually was abandoned at the time, and we mounted a lot of works in this building. We are constantly just looking for spaces around the community to show work. And those works actually instigate a lot of conversations amongst the young and the old people in the community. And the older people were really happy that something like this was happening because the community was actually known in the news only for terrible things, killing, fight, and all that. And at this time that we are running the festival from 2016 till now, the narrative, the story about the community in the news had changed. It has become something about national festival, training, talk about workshop, very art related and all that. Yeah, you can see in this image how a foreign artist was, she kind of put herself within the space. And I kind of like that performance a lot because she used the megaphone, which the community is used to for praying, for marketing some kind of tradomedical medicines and all that. So they were used to it. And she was actually playing some of those things that people will say to actually market their tradomedical stuff, within the community. And it was well accepted, And I'd met Verbeni some years back, and we did a performance together in Ghana. It was his own project. He invited me for this performance, and I invited him to Nigeria to be part of Iwaya Community Art Festival in 2017. And when I saw him, Vabeni had embraced, he had become an LGBTQ person, queer, and I had no idea of that. I know the community that I live in, that people kind of, I would not completely say that they are homophobic, but then it's not something that is accepted within the community. And I had invited him all the way from Ghana, and he had to perform. And I remember actually talking to my team a lot about him. I remember talking about safety. This was the most challenging artist that I've invited to the festival. Is the one who had done the most challenging performance, logically, security wise, visual wise as well, because it was almost naked on the street, and we are not used to that. You know, where I come from is a mad person, actually. And this is a performance happening. And who is going to explain this performance to people within the community? But then after the performance, we had this artist talk where people that really were interested in his performance came together, and then he talked about, the idea behind his performance and all that. But I just wanted to highlight that with the fact that it was a community art festival, we are taking serious risk to bring certain artists to present certain art form within the community. And that is how I like to work as an artist curator, because I actually don't want to. It took me a long time before I actually started saying that I'm an artist curator. For a long time, I don't want to identify as a curator, even when I had done international exhibitions with a renowned curator as an assistant around the globe. Because in Nigeria, you have to be a curator, you have to have gone to read curatorial studies. I actually was drawing from my knowledge of doing things with people and collaboration. And I started this festival. It wasn't something that was easy to navigate. So even call yourself a curator wasn't something that was easy because of the gatekeepers, I would say. Because I remember confronting one person sometimes saying that curating is, overrated. You are a curator within the gallery space or within the museum space. I am a curator within the same space and also more on the outside. Quite a lot of these people who claim to be curator cannot do this kind of daring project. They are limited, in terms of scope of seeing things. Quite a lot of them cannot see things beyond the gallery space, beyond uh, four walls of a particular space and put the work, and it's kind of a safe space for them. I like to navigate this very crooked space and present something to the people, and also quite a lot of time free of charge, quite a lot of time, using a lot of my money to actually do this project because I believe so much in bringing art to the people, and quite a lot of people that we talk about in the gallery space and they don't have that access. These are the people that will never go to the museum. They will never go for an exhibition, except if it's my mom or my brother. Our strategy in the project was actually to go to spaces where you already have a ready-made audience, like a football space. We collaborated with the Football Association of the community, and for each edition, we'll give them money to organize a football competition. And then there we can actually, during the halftime, we can have a performance on the stage. We can show them some images and all that, meeting them at their own space. Through that, we were able to reach quite a lot of people at a time. I think that I should move to talking about my practice. When I stopped doing traditional photography and I wanted to test materials and work with them and see what works. I was invited to be one of the artists selected for Top Champion in 2015. And I had done a project before then. Indonesia was where we have the largest congregation of Muslims. I wanted to go there to share something, as a Muslim and also as a Sufist. That was how I came about creating this particular series. It was the beginning of my journey into using material. And since then, I think I have about 3 series that I've created with the Islamic slates. And they are not the same. They are quite different pieces, so to say. My sense of photography changed drastically, kind of moved away big time from documentary photography and then try to experiment with images. So this was the exhibition view, Palais de Tokyo. There was a group exhibition 3, 4 years ago, and I was part of it. So this was my installation view. There is a poem somewhere that I've written somewhere talking about Lagos and all that. So during COVID, this was what I came about. I decided working during COVID. I really cannot do anything. I went on the streets. I cannot even make pictures of people that are hungry and angry. My conscience as a photographer cannot document the faces of this or the sorrow of these people. So I retreated into my apartment and I started working with the material that I could. At the time, I had quite a lot of jean material that I had abandoned somewhere that I don't wear anymore. And I started looking at them and I think that I could transform them to something. And that was how I started working with them. And for the first time, I exhibited in 2021 this particular series. If you can see my background that I'm working on at the moment, and I have other ones that I'm working on as well. Since 2015, I started, working with materials, not just photography. Me, when I was doing my residency at the Tutuola Solitude, sometime between 2022 and 2023, you can also see how I'm working with that material as well. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any question, please, I'll be here to answer them.
Thank you so much, Aderemi. That was really quite a journey. You being a practitioner, like you call yourself as an artist curator, you specifically mentioned that you don't really want to identify yourself solely as a curator, but you prefer to call yourself as an artist curator. And also in your work, you also traverse between these different boundaries that you were reflecting on. And also you were talking about like creating new audiences, that you are creating exhibition in this non-spaces, so to say, like outside of this white cube narrative that has been quite traditional. So in the curatorial practice of like 21st century, the role of the curator has quite shifted from the traditional idea of curator being the keepers, and now curators are becoming more as facilitator. So in your experience, what kind of, beyond the typical challenges of like fundings we have like in for self-initiated projects, challenges you might have had working with the community?
If you come from the kind of community that I actually come from, you will know that, and trying to solve a problem, actually, you will know that you are going to meet a lot of roadblocks.
Mhm.
And the roadblocks, they are also the elders that are living within the community. Quite a lot of them don't understand what art could do for young people on the street, to them, to their family, didn't quite see anything in it. So when we approach them that we would like to mount some works on their wall, at the outer part of their building, is always the answer is always no. Bringing forward from my practice as a documentary photographer, I don't like to use people's spaces or to take something from people without letting that person know. I like to negotiate with people, and there's a lot of time that is being wasted, having this conversation with people. And sometimes I just say to myself and my team that, look, let's just do it. This is the reason why in the middle of night, we don't even mount our works during the day. We mount the work in the middle of night. So you just wake up and you find it there. You can then do whatever you like with it. Do you want to remove it? Is it beautiful enough for you to see? Is it engaging enough? Do you want to start, engaging the image, or you want to de-associate yourself from it? Do you want it off your wall? Do you think it can actually instigate something? I mean, start something, some kind of conversation, some kind of. Do you enjoy looking at those images, for instance? Like I mentioned, these guys, that are always sitting in this particular space, and they saw a poster that we mounted, and they said, this particular one, we had about 10 posters mounted in that particular space. And they said, this particular one is not suitable for younger people who are passing by to go to school every day. So they removed it by themselves. So these constantly negotiating the non-space with the people who own the street, because I don't think they have this in Europe, but then in this part of the world, some people actually own the street, and you have to learn for you to be able to have access to it. it's quite challenging. Quite a lot of time has been wasted on it. And people who have not been educated about art, they saw art that we used to have, the traditional art, the masquerade festival, the musicians playing on the street. They didn't see all of these things as art, basically. So it's really problematic for them to really piece it together. We've had to stop traffic for like 10 to 15 minutes for a performance to take place, in a particular part of the community. And it's not easy stopping the traffic for 20 minutes to really stand our ground that this performance must take place. You have to see it, you have to learn from it, you have to. All this negotiation has been quite challenging.
I come from Bangladesh, and in Bangladesh, we were organizing a photo festival, an international photo festival called Chobi Mela. And in Old Dhaka, when there were times to also install artworks, that was also a series of negotiations as well. But I think this is also, these negotiations are also important conversations in terms of
Thank you.
video audience building, because this is what you are also taking the art outside of this white cube spaces and bringing them into public spaces and creating these conversations that the community had, they took the decisions themselves, like which image per se is appropriate, or appropriate, quote unquote, like appropriate for the public audienceship, or not. I think this is one of the biggest like challenges for community oriented practices for
Yes.
practitioners. So you also established the Tutuola Institute, which was also kind of like emerged from your performance of like White Money, and you created this infrastructure of Tutuola Institute to come out of, in terms of like fundings and grants, with the dependency of global south that has typically has on the global north. So that was kind of like a positioning, that is kind of a statement that you positioned yourself in. Would you like to talk briefly about the Tutuola Institute and its activity, and also how it emerged, and how it's continuing as an artist curator, as a community oriented practitioner? Like, we take on different roles, and what are the kind of this diversity or this dimension of these different roles? Would you like to share a little bit?
Starting as an art manager, because I'm a self-taught and self-trained kind of, even though I had interned with a theater company for 8 years. But then every other thing, when I started producing, I learned on my own. I always question where the money is coming from. I mentioned about the street. I could actually have one or two streets where I'm comfortable, where they know me, so well, and put all my stuff there, and nobody will question anything, and nobody is going to stress me out. But then I don't like staying in my comfort zone. I like pushing things beyond the boundary. I think it was 2019. I had worked with a particular company called Works in Berlin for several years. We started working together since 2012. And they reached out to me saying that would I like to be part of a project called White Money? And then they explained that the project is all about the dichotomy between the global north and the global south, art organizations and funding bodies, and also cultural workers. And I had just finished a funded project at that time. And I was so angry with the fact that of the project actually treated him in a way that I didn't like. And I wanted to voice out that through this particular invitation. I'm like, yes, I'm going to be part of it. So I wanted to talk about it. I was so, yeah, even though I actually I let them know that they treated me in a way that I didn't like. And, I got an apology for that. This was a European organization, and this was me from here. And the project took place in Lagos, to be precise. And I got an apology for that. But then I wasn't happy with the fact that we signed a contract and all that. And no, they didn't honor from their own end. And that put me in a serious problem during the period of the project. All they were concerned about was a report. And, I quickly wanted to say this, that a lot of funding bodies in Europe, and let's even take it outside art jurisdiction and talk about political and economic jurisdictions as well, that they give money to a lot of organizations and a lot of persons in Africa without monitoring it. And they talk about corruption. How can you say, people are corrupt when you don't even monitor the money that you, and we're talking about a lot of money here. If I will get a funding of about 20,000 euros now, that would be a lot of money for me. It may not be anything for someone in Europe, but then I would love for you to monitor the process. So when I was called to be part of this white money, I was happy, and I wanted to address that. We were constantly having conversation around these issues and all that. One day it kind of occurred to me that I could do something. Why do we always have to go to wait for a European cultural organization? And I'm talking about like organizations like Goethe Institute, Alliance Francaise, British Council to fund our artistic projects. Nigeria is a rich country. We have oil, we have gold, we have all kinds of mineral resources. We have a lot of rich people. Our artists are flying, our musical artists are flying private jets. So why can't we have a cultural organization that will serve a Gote Europe as well? I wanted to do something, in this line, and I couldn't do it for Nigeria as a country because it's we have a lot of ethnic groups in the country, and I had to just focus on my own people, my own language that I understand so well, which is Yoruba language. We have about 250 languages in Nigeria, and I don't know how to present something like that. So, and this was at that point an artistic project, but then I took it beyond just being an artistic project. I went ahead to actually register it as a limited by guarantee organization before we actually have the inauguration in Berlin in 2021 at Sofin Sailing. That was participation. Some participants made performance and all that. And I actually made an exhibition where I presented two big visual artists that I'd worked with in Nigeria, and they are from Berlin. That is, one is Mario Pfeiffer, and the second one is Candice Breathe. She's a big sister to me. And when I told her about the idea, she quickly embraced it. I said, Remy, I'm going to give you the support. Anything that you need, tell me. And then she presented a project that we created about 12 years ago in Nigeria together. And then I invited also an artist from Brazil, whom I'd worked with and I'd invited to Lagos for Iwaya Community Art Festival because I love the subject of a work. It kind of key into the idea that I wanted to. So I presented Tutuola Institute as somewhat a Goethe Institute or British Council, when you go for an exhibition at Goethe Institute and all that. So that was the beginning of Tutuola Institute. But mainly the idea was to serve as a contemporary art space that is not that doesn't have barrier, that doesn't have limits, that serves across continents and work with quite that is quite flexible and work with quite a lot of artists because I love this idea of the global South. I mean the South conversation, like what we are having right now. Like because I have a lot of friends in Indonesia and I've been working with them since the inception of the Iwaya Community Art Festival. I will always bring them to be part of. Even when they say we have only one image to give to you, I will say yes, give it to me. The only problem is that I've not been able to bring any of them to Nigeria for residency, and I still look forward to that. And that was how I actually created Tutuola Institute. We started by we had the inauguration in Berlin. We have a small office in Lagos. And the second iteration of White Money, which was now titled No More White Money, we had the performance. All of us now created one piece, which was a performance. And during the performance, we collected money from the audience. And that money was now being given to Tutuola Institute. So with that money at the moment, we have rented a house in Oshobo, where I live currently, And we have quite a lot of space in this building, but it's an old building that was built during the Second World War. Needs a lot of renovation. For historical purpose, we wanted this building for the project, and we had paid for 10 years, and we are now looking for the money to renovate the building. It's not renovation. We are doing a restoration because we want the building to maintain its look and aesthetics by the time we are done with it. And afterwards, we can then begin to invite artists. We are going to have residency program. We are going to have archive on this building. We are going to have a library on this building. We are going to have a gallery space on this building. I'm not a traditional curator. I'm still going to be having my community engagement projects, let's say.
Yes, I mean, which is really powerful and also important for your work about this aspect and notion of community engagement practices, like what you
Mhm.
mentioned during your talk, that sometimes artists or photographers or researchers, they go into certain communities and develop projects and exhibit the work elsewhere, and the community themselves does not have any connection to or does not really have any agency, so to say, over their own work, over their own stories,
Mm-hmm.
over their own narrative. And
Thank you.
what you were doing, like having this constant conversation, constant negotiation, constant
Mm-hmm.
these dialogues, and on a human level, it could be tiring, but still you were continuing these conversations and really building these institutions and infrastructures together with the community and being in dialogue with the community, and also how the Tutuola Institute and the building now you have, and also you were foreseeing this upcoming future of the institute itself, which did not necessarily came from any funding or any support from, like, typically how often cases like it happens that from the global north, perhaps maybe not often cases, like majority of the cases has been traditionally have been happening, but you are building together with the community and with the support of the community. So because as cultural practitioners or art workers or however we define ourselves, I believe that this very diversity of the roles that sometimes we take on onto ourselves, independent curators most specifically, are taking on this very different role, sometimes as community managers, sometimes as facilitators, sometimes as grant writers, etc., etc., etc. So this is also redefining the very definition of how the position of the curator has been understood so far. I remember, like, when we were talking and I was talking about this monument curators being the monumental figures of institution and diverting from, like, the role of the curator being these
Mm-hmm.
monumental figures to become the facilitators of exchanges, or the someone who hold the space where this kind of exchanges can happen. And I think this is a very important shift in the practice of curators. If anyone has any question, please just unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can raise your hand. You can also put your question in the chat box. Bianca said that it was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you,
Um,
Bianca.
I have
any,
one question then.
sure.
Uh,
Yes, Kate. Hi.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting. So about your project in the community, my question would be, how did you assess if the project was successful or not? Because as you said, the audience, they don't know how to appreciate or how to react to the art. So yeah, maybe the dialogue itself was quite important, but at the end of the day, okay, you showed your work and you saw your people's reaction, but at the end of the day, how did you assess if that was a successful or not?
Thank you for your question. I remember being part of a webinar organized by the British Council some 4 years back, and they asked the same question. And they actually wanted to know how many people, if I call it a festival, how many people attended the festival per year. And I told them that in the community we have at least 300,000 people living there. And give or take, we would have reached at least 100 to 150,000 people in different part of the community. And they didn't quite get that. They wanted all of them to be in a particular space, and then we make this picture, and then we have thousands of people. You can see the head of thousands of people, within a small space. And that wasn't it for us. We actually went into every nook and cranny of the community, all the corners. We meet people in their own spaces, doing their own time. We don't have to leave. You don't have to do anything. So the first year was a bit difficult, but not quite difficult because some people actually stole our images and mounted in their room, in their apartment. They stole it from the streets. And sometimes, after the festival, about 2, 3 months later, we got to know, oh, this person stole this particular image. This person stole. I mean, they came out and just took them off the street and put them in their building. The second year, people actually shown interest and gave us more room to exhibit, to present our ideas. The third year was quite interesting, because now quite a lot of the guys that appeared on the street and all that, they joined us in mounting the images. They started having interaction with it. And every year since we stopped, every year people write to me, people call us on the street, when are you having this festival? When is it coming up again? I mean, people that I'd never thought that they would even have seen any of our editions of the festival. So we know that we have really made an impact in bringing this to the people, and we actually have an audience now. We can be sure if we bring you as an artist to the community, people will come to listen to you. People will see what you want to present, and enjoy it. Even though contemporary art wasn't their form, but then we have been able to re-educate them within 5 years or 6 years that we have been artists, without actually sitting them in a room and having this conversation with them. Because some leaders in the community wanted me to actually have a conference with young people and all that, and tell them, this is how you have to behave. And I said, no, don't worry. We have time. We are not rushing. I'm not leaving this community soon. So the first year, second year, and we started seeing the impact from the third year. We've had 4 editions and 3 festivals and 1 biennial, and it's been quite interesting. And we have seen changes in the community as well. We work with secondary school students. So the principal of the school was walking on the street and saw some of the images we mounted on the street. And he was talking to his pupils that, look, who are these guys? I want to meet them. One way or the other, we were looking for another space for an artist to make performance, and we will need quite a lot of young people to engage. So we went to the school and it was like, look at the people that I'm looking for. They came to me. So he gave us access to his school. We started working with the kids in the school. And finally, it gave us a space within the structure of the school to have an extension of our laboratory. So I hope that I answer your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the consistent engagement is important, I guess.
This is also the new narratives that we are talking about, that, like how we define like the success of our initiatives or projects, and also how we can define the success of a project in terms of in the White Cube spaces. It's not really, the parameters are not the same or similar even for the public spaces, because they're like, we cannot really like count the heads, like what you say, that 800 people, like 800 heads they want to see in the photos, in terms of like assessing the success of projects. Yeah, what you are talking about, that the first year, the second year, the third year, fourth year, fifth year, then this also changes gradually, right? And you see the difference, and the community, like they themselves become part of these initiatives, like what they were asking you, that because this is also a very similar experience that we also had in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, like when we are working with different communities, and mounting these artworks or photographs in public spaces, and we get to learn a lot as well from the public. I'm going to read like two messages. One is from Bipasha Hayat. Thank you so much for sharing your visionary journey. All the best. Would love to collaborate in future if there is any possibility. I'm Bipasha. I always envisioned similar kind of activities in Bangladesh, which can make changes in the life of people. Great job. Thank you so much, Vipasha.
Thank you.
Blanca Roach, thank you for the lecture. It was really interesting. I actually had the chance to see No More White Money in Amsterdam in December. Given that
Oh.
Given that the Tutuola Institute and No More White Money operate on two levels, challenging funding structures in both European and African contexts, how have you seen European audiences respond to these initiatives? That's one question. And do you think this response has the potential to shape future funding models for African and diasporic artists? How can intellectual community engagement take its shape for the long term? So you have three questions.
Wow, interesting.
Should I repeat them for you?
Please, let me take them one by one.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
the
the first
one.
question is, how have you seen European audiences respond to these initiatives? She's referring to the No More White Money performance.
Well, I really can't measure the response because of the cultural difference. And I'm saying that because we collected money during the performance, and some people actually thought that we tricked them into giving the money. Some people got really angry at the end of the performance. Some people were happy. I mean, a guy came to us in Netherlands. He came to us after the performance and said he's not happy because people did not contribute enough for for Tutuola Institute. And I'm like, no, it's just a performance. If if you contribute, fine. If you don't contribute, it's okay. We're going to move on, and we just wanted you guys to know that this is a challenge, and we would like to solve it in a different way. And sometimes I feel a bit awkward with the fact that the money was going to Tutuola Institute alone because we have 6 performance, and each one of them have very different project that it could actually put money into. Like the Flameworks is actually looking for money at the moment for their project in Tanzania, and they are doing crowdfunding. I will be launching crowdfunding for Tutuola next week for the restoration of this building. Anuja is in India, Abhishek is in the Netherlands. We are all struggling all the time to change the funding structure or how to get our projects being funded. I really don't know how to feel about it, but the response was not quite bad. It's actually a question that I would not love to answer, but then because of how I feel about the whole process, it was a performance, it was interesting, it was nice to get the money from the people, but then do I know how they feel? Apart from those that will come to me and say this is how they feel about the performance. Some of them even say that we didn't give enough. Why some of them are saying that you actually tricked us to collecting our money? If that is able to answer your question. So the second one, I can go for the second one.
And do you think this response has the potential to shape future funding models for African and diasporic artists?
It does, if it is not done in the process. How we have to, I'm going to say this for free. We actually made the audience feel bad, for being European. The idea was that quite a lot of Europeans have actually enjoyed from the colonial past of their ancestors, their history in Africa, in other global South countries and all that. So if I have to make you feel bad before you can give me money, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's something that I want to do because we did all of that. We did meditation. You have to part with your money and da 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 da. I don't think it's the right way to go because I don't want anybody to feel bad before you can give money for a project or you can support anything. If we can find, I'm sure some of my colleagues might not agree with me on this. I'm at the receiving end, and this is how I feel personally. That I don't think it's fun doing it though, but I don't want you to feel bad for you to be able to contribute to any project.
The last question is, how can intellectual community engagement take its shape for the long term?
We have to constantly look for alternatives and not just be comfortable, with what we have. We have a lot of artists practicing. Where I come from, I make money from nothing but art, and the government don't give me any. I'm not even recognized by the government as an artist. Meanwhile, quite a lot of my colleagues that lives in Europe, they have what they call or foundational money, something like that comes to the company like every year, and they can use that for their projects and all that. We have to constantly look for alternatives and also collaborate a lot to make the entire thing sustainable. We should not be comfortable with what we have, with how we operate. We have to constantly push the boundary.
If no one has any question, I think that on that note of we have to push the boundaries and we have to look to keep finding for alternatives, I think we can end our conversation here today. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you also Aderemi for sharing your practice. And we look forward to have more and more conversations with practitioners from different parts of the world, and this is how we are operating virtually, and we would like to take the opportunity of this virtual platform to hold these spaces where we can actually have these conversations in a non-hierarchical, quite horizontal format. So thank you everyone for joining. Our next talk will be on Saturday, March 8th. But yeah, we will be posting about them on our social media and also on our website. So thank you everyone for joining, and have
Thank
a
you so
nice
much.
day.
And you
Bye.
too.